Welcome to this another episode of podcast from the White House. I'm Lalit Jha, a correspondent here. With me is Doug, a White House correspondent. Let me start with asking him what's happening here today.
Well, this is a time of great chaos. President Biden has shown a great degree of sophistication and competence dealing with a multitude of international crises. However, these crises still exist. Let's talk first about oil prices.
Okay, tell me there have been some surprise announcements coming from OPEC.
Really, it's a disappointment to the administration and also to Congress. President Biden had made it a point to reach out to Saudi Arabia so that they could reach some sort of at least rapprochement. They weren't looking for a direct conflict. But MBS, who is that's Mohammed bin Salman, who is the ersatz leader of Saudi Arabia, announced with his OPEC cartel that they were going to reduce the amount of oil production by about 2 million barrels a day, which directly doesn't affect the United States because the United States actually is an oil exporter at this point, but it affects world markets. As we know, in Europe, there is a tremendous energy shortage due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it will drive up oil prices. This also will affect domestic policies at home because, of course, we're fighting inflation already, and oil prices are a direct impact upon Americans' pocketbooks. So this is politically untenable for President Biden.
You said the U.S. is a net exporter of energy, and I'm coming for a press conference from the Indian Minister of Oil and Natural Gas, Hardeep Puri. He said India has imported 20 billion worth of energy from the United States. But tell me, if this U.S. is a net exporter, then what impact is going to have on the domestic oil prices because of MBS decision or OPEC decision?
It'll definitely raise prices. Most oil analysts believe that that'll be about 30 cents a gallon at the pump right now initially. However, we don't know. Maybe it could go up more. The main thing is that MBS has made it very clear that he is not working with the United States on so many issues, not only inflation in this country, but also with its problems with Russia, because this increase in price of oil directly helps Russia. And this is not what the administration wants to be doing.
So you said U.S. is not dissatisfied with what has happened from the OPEC. But tell me, do you expect any reaction or action from the U.S. in response to the OPEC decision?
I do, because I think that there's already been public statements from members of Congress. I'm thinking of Senator Blumenthal, who've asked, why is the United States sending troops to Saudi Arabia? We have thousands of troops guarding Saudi Arabia when Saudi Arabia isn't guarding our interests. It's a very good question, and I do think that there's going to be a lot of not just pressure, but will for the United States to do something, because they do not want to appear powerless to what Saudi Arabia is doing.
Why Saudi has taken such a decision?
Well, oil prices in general are going down. I mean, due to the decrease in demand. And of course, economics is based on supply and demand. Cut the supply, you'll increase the demand. You'll increase the price of oil. And that's what's going on.
Why is Saudi, you said, is siding with Putin right now?
Say that again, please?
Why is Saudi Arabia siding with Putin?
Well, I don't know if it's actually siding with Putin, because
or his decision is going to help.
What's happening is Saudi Arabia is working in what it thinks it's its best interest in order to raise revenues for itself. However, it's also making a political statement, because he's doing this right before the midterms in November, and so it will have an impact. There is a sense that Saudi Arabia is tipping the scale in the election by increasing the oil prices and therefore favoring Republicans. That's the feeling from this administration in the White House.
So when do you expect a retaliatory action from the U.S.?
Well, I think it's going to come from a couple sides. I think it's going to come from President Biden. We don't know what he's going to do. I mean, I think, he is really thrown for a loop on this one. Remember the famous fist bump with MBS? Many in the White House did not appreciate that at all, and they were upset that Biden was going to be used, which he was. It turns out, but also in Congress. Congress is going to almost definitely call for hearings and ask, why is it we send troops to support Saudi Arabia when Saudi Arabia isn't helping the United States? That's what it feels like to many politicians here in Washington.
You mentioned about Putin. We'll come to Putin's war or the Ukraine war a little bit later.
Okay.
But let's go to the other side of Asian continent, it's Korea, right? There has been provocative missile launched by North Koreans. How do you see that here?
Well, we all have had pet animals, and you know that your animal is upset when it misbehaves, when it does things it shouldn't do, etc. And it's almost as though Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, wants to he wants to incite. Why he wants to incite, we don't know. Maybe he is looking for some food aid. Who knows what it is? But he is, again, making it very clear that he wants attention for whatever reason it is. So he is sending missiles not just to the South China Sea, but over Japan, which is incredibly provocative. Of course, the United States has sent more military back to South Korea. They've also sent the USS Ronald Reagan, which is not just one ship. It is an aircraft carrier fleet. It is an entire array of ships that it brings. So it's a show of presence.
How does that endanger peace and security in that region of the world?
Well, technically there has never been an end to the Korean War from the early 1950s. There's only been détente, and of course we have this large militarized zone between North and South Korea. So technically, we're still at war. The UN is. I mean, it was UN that fought that war, and Americans played a great role in that. Who knows? I mean, the problem with Kim Jong-un is that he does have nuclear weapons at this point. And for whatever reason, he has decided to say, hey, look, I have these. Look at me, I have these. The problem with Kim Jong-un's use of nuclear weapons is, what do you do with them? I mean, you can threaten to destroy a city, but what military gain do you get out of dropping a nuclear bomb? Not to mention the amount of blowback diplomatically one would get.
Just like you mentioned about the timing of the OPEC and Saudis, this is an cutting the oil production. Do you see any link between North Korea's provocative missile launch and the elections here?
Well, Kim Jong-un and former Trump did have a relationship. We don't know what that relationship was, but Trump did say that he had gotten many beautiful letters from Kim Jong-un. Now remember, Kim Jong-un is a dictator of the most horrible kind. And he has starved his people. He has murdered many of his own family members in the most horrific ways. We're not talking about just a leader. We're talking about a pretty horrible human being. I don't know what his play is. I don't think most Americans know. And we call North Korea the hermit state for a reason, because it is so closed off. It's very difficult to know what their actual motivation is.
Let's move to the Putin's war in Ukraine. 8 months, more than 8 months. What is your analysis of the situation there?
It is a very difficult situation for us because at one point, I mean, America has made very clear, and President Biden has made it very clear to Russia, this will not stand. We will support Ukraine and not allow you, Vladimir Putin, to take over a country. This is why the United Nations was created after Germany annexed the Sudetenland in 1939. And this is directly opposed to all of 70 years of ersatz peace in the world. So the question is for Biden how to handle this. The thing is they want to push back Russia from Ukraine, but they do not want to start a conflagration, a world war. That is the big problem. And so the question is not only to push Putin out, but it is also not to provoke him into further steps into creating a broader conflict with NATO. And that's why NATO hasn't gotten directly involved with this conflict.
As someone has said, as people say, there's no one is a real winner in a war, right? No one wins the war.
Nobody.
But tell me, where is it now, right now? Who is winning it?
Well, Russia's losing, okay?
Why?
Well, their initial goal was just to take over the country within days. That did not work out. They are now, they have lost, by most estimates, at least 100,000 casualties in this conflict, just invading Ukraine. Now, that's probably about 30,000 deaths. And now Russia has called in more draftees in order to replace the people that they've lost. The question is it's putting huge pressure domestically on Putin. Now, of course, there's no real kind of check and balance with Putin in Russia, so it's very difficult to know what will happen, frankly. But at the same time, the United States wants to be sure that it gives Putin a way out of this conflict. That's the biggest problem that we have right now, is we know how to win this war militarily, but we don't want to push Putin into such a corner that he does what he's been threatening to do, and that is to use nuclear weapons.
So what's the way out for Russia right now?
That's the big question. That is the question. The United States knows that this is a problem. They don't know what the answer is. They are trying to manage this conflict so it doesn't get worse than it already is. Our intelligence agencies just revealed this week that they believe that Ukraine was behind the murder of a hard-right blogger in Russia. And I believe that that was an indication from the United States intelligence agencies and from President Biden to Ukraine, hey, don't misbehave. We're trying to keep this thing under control. Do not make this conflict worse than it already is. If we could find a way. I mean, for instance, President Biden had said that this conflict is as bad and is as dangerous as the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And President Kennedy found a way in that conflict with Khrushchev to secretly remove missiles from Turkey. What are our missiles in Turkey today? We don't have any. We don't have any. I mean, I think we're looking at every option available to somehow figure out a way of giving Putin something for him to withdraw.
So today we have discussed three major global hotspots: Ukraine, North Korea, and all major oil crisis which is happening, its impact on the U.S. domestic or international energy prices. But tell me, we are now a few weeks away from the midterm elections, right? What's the mood in the White House now?
Well, it's good and bad. I mean, here's the thing. People run for the presidency domestically, but the president leads internationally. He is basically the ersatz leader of the free world. And so, I mean, domestically, we are worried here in the United States about inflation. President Biden knows that that is his Achilles heel. MBS didn't make it any easier for him. So right now we had a jobs report today. And the thing is that what the administration wants right now is for inflation to be under control. That means they do not want wages to rise. They do not want to see too many jobs being created. They had actually wished for about 200,000 jobs to be created. It looks more that maybe 500,000 jobs were to be created. In a vacuum, that would be great to have more jobs. But right now, with inflationary pressures, that's not what we want. And so the question is, how to balance this, how to message this. So the Democrats are right now trying to veer over to social issues. That would include women's right to choose an abortion and to get away from economy. Because right now, the best economic plan, according to the Fed, would be to do anything possible to mitigate inflation, which means to get companies to stop hiring and stop paying people more money. That's what it really comes down to. And so that's not something you politically can run on. And we remember when President Carter had installed Paul Volcker into the Federal Reserve, he did that, and President Carter didn't get reelected.
Great. Well, President Biden is traveling to Delaware this weekend. He will be spending time, I believe, with his family and grandchildren, right? Such a nice,
Yeah.
he will get time to munch upon, think about what should be the agenda next week or how to handle this crisis. But he's a seasoned leader, mature leader. He has been a senator, vice president, the president in the public service for the last three and a half decades.
Right. And he was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Let's talk about that next week.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank
you for being with us.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
It was a pleasure. And so we just lost one of our lights, which is fine.
At the last end.
That was it, in the last second. All right.